Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Vixen Voice. Today, I'm having another conversation with Shelle. So, always excited about this. Hi, Shelle. Welcome.
Hi.
So, if you're listening for the first time, Shelle Vernon is the co facilitator of the Vixen Mastermind with me. She has her own company, Milestone, where they do executive coaching. They're working on a cool new thing with an outsourced HR department. So, for those of you with small businesses, super effective. And she's launching the family boardroom to help high schoolers and their families kind of integrate a lot of the leadership principles that she taught and coached on in the corporate world and continues to. So, as you can hear, Shelle is truly a force of nature. Don't let her gentle demeanor fool you for 1 second. So, Shelle, welcome. Good to have you.
Thank you. It's great to be here, April. I love podcasting with you.
I know it's so fun. Maybe we need to start another podcast where we just chat with each other all the time. People
Our
would
cornball chats.
people would be like, "This is the stuff you two talk about." Yeah, this is what we talk about. This
Oh
is what
goodness.
we talk about when no one's listening or when we're on a podcast sharing with all of you. So, super excited. Today, we are talking about feminine and masculine energy. And we're probably going to share some ways that we notice it in our lives and also tools that we have found effective to balance our feminine and masculine. Now, this is different for everyone, but I think this topic's important to talk to. I get feedback from everyone, women in my small group coaching who are leaders and executives in corporate America, women in our mastermind 2.0 that are leading companies doing multiple millions of revenue with teams. Our core Vixen mastermind, we talk about this all the time. They're solopreneurs scaling to 1 million in revenue. So really just women in all walks of life have been touched by this conversation. And it's really understanding when we're in our masculine energy, when we're in our feminine, and maybe when each one is most beneficial, I guess is the best way to put it. How would you put it, Shelle?
I I think I would put it that way, and how to flow in and out of both. But I think you first need to know situationally which energy you need to be in. So I think you described that perfectly.
Well, yeah, and when I'm coaching on this, I actually did a whole small group coaching module on feminine, getting, owning your feminine essence, right? And getting back into our feminine energy. Which, by the way, you can go to YouTube and drop in the comments. If you'd love to participate in that, let me know. We will launch it again. Um, but the interesting thing is I coach all my clients on this, and the first step is just awareness, right? Start becoming aware. Oh, I'm in my feminine right now. Oh, I'm in my masculine right now. And I frown, but I don't mean to say masculine's bad, but when we're in our masculine, you can literally see it in our face and our demeanor. Like that's when we get a little sharper, right? When we're in our feminine, when you start learning to recognize it, watch other women as well, and you can be like, "Ooh, she's nice and soft. She's in her feminine now. Ooh, she's getting shit done. She's in her masculine right now," right? So you actually, I think the first step is awareness and just starting to discern even what it is and when it happens. And then I think the second phase is to pay attention to yourself and when you're in your feminine and when you're in your masculine. And a lot of times when you have conflict or you feel guilty or remorse after the fact, you are probably in your
Yes.
masculine when you should have been in your feminine, right? So again, there's a time for your masculine, there's a time for your feminine. What's super cool is we women can slide back and forth. We are very adaptable, which is one of our superpowers. However, I always say your superpower can become your kryptonite if you don't control it, right? So in my opinion, why I like talking about this is, I was a litigator, then I was a financial advisor. I've been in very male dominated industries. Shelley worked with a bunch of engineers, very male dominated industry in the past. I think it's switching in engineering. Unfortunately, in financial industry, women made up 30% of the industry 12 years ago. They make up 30% today. So not a whole lot has changed, right? And I think that statistic is the same. Again, this is just my personal theory. Not because new women are not coming into the industry, but because women are burning out in the industry because the expectation is that you're in your masculine energy 24/7. And it's like a slow burn. You don't even know what's happening, but either you burn out because your energy is drained or your personal life starts exploding because you're never getting out of your masculine energy. And, again, the feminists are not going to be happy with this statement, but I've said this to many of my coaching clients. I've said this to my own mother when she gets in her masculine mode. There cannot be two men in the household, right? So if you're married and you want to stay happily married and you're married to a masculine man, if you bring home that masculine energy, it's going to be it's going to cause issues, and you've probably seen this, right? So again, there's a time and a place for everything. But Shelley, what are your thoughts or feelings on the controversial statement I just made?
I honestly think you're absolutely right because I have several coaching clients that are badass females, right? And it does implode or explode the personal relationship. And so one of the questions that I ask during coaching is ask him when he feels like you're in your feminine versus when you're
Yes.
in your masculine. And they come back and they're like, holy crap, I'm usually in my masculine. And then I can say, because masculine energy will do this every time.
Yep.
Feminine energy is meant to complement that or even sometimes de-escalate it, right? And if you're always in your masculine because you are a boss at work and then you come home and you're still trying to be that same boss, well, in another episode, as you discussed, we both have that D trait, but we understand that when one of us is up front, one of us can kind of scale back. It doesn't mean that
Mm-hmm.
we're being overshadowed. It just means that I'm going to let you be the lead right now. And then when it's my turn, you let me be the lead, right? Same in a relationship. And that's the masculine and feminine equivalent of that. So I think that you're exactly right.
Yeah, and what's interesting is this shocks a lot of women when they first learn it. But if you are a woman in this life, I believe you have chosen to be a woman in this life for some purpose, right? Your soul chose this. Um, we'll just kind of keep this simple in our analogy. And so as a woman, it means you should be in your feminine energy maybe a little more, or you should be very balanced. And part of feminine energy is resting and receiving. So like Shelley said, if you're a badass all day long and you come home and you're a badass too, when are you recuperating, right? When are you resting and receiving? When are you allowing yourself to be taken care of? Because that's when we replenish our feminine energy. And our feminine energy is our creativity, which, by the way, not
Yes.
only creates art and a beautiful home, it also solves business problems, helps team disputes. Communication is a feminine trait. And we all know how important communication is in today's world. Community, having a sense of community is a feminine trait. So these are all important values that we want to foster, and I would argue is are really lacking in today's world because for a long time it's thought that the successful way to be, think, and do is in the masculine, right? The very analytical, logical, sacrificing, giving of yourself, grinding it out. I mean, there's a reason they call it hustle culture, right? So I don't know about you, Shelley, but when I see women like promoting hustle culture, I mean, I'm literally like the see no evil, right? Like, what are you doing? Like, because you know what? You can be amazing at business, you can be amazing at home, and it does not require hustle. It requires another set of skills. So, Shelley, how do you feel when you see that?
I think that we have been socialized as women to take on that masculine role because in a
Mhm.
boardroom or in a high stakes meeting, it can be you can be seen as irrelevant if you don't have that masculine presence. When in
Yeah.
actuality, if we took the time to ask our male counterparts, how do you see me? They would tell you, I see you in a very masculine way, right? And the way that men articulate it in corporate is she's very aggressive. That's a masculine
Mhm.
trait, right?
Yep.
They don't know how to articulate it properly, but that's the word that is used. And but that's the behavior or the that's the mannerism that we're taking on. Whereas I learned very early on in my corporate career, if I took the opposite of that and stayed in my
Mhm.
feminine,
Yes.
I was really heard. I was received very well. And we talk about receiving, right? Men want to give more to that energy, even in a corporate setting, because
Oh,
they feel drawn to it versus this natural
yeah.
fight, right? And so I would say, even in business, pay attention. Are men kind of like repelling and they have, you can tell when men think that you're
Mhm.
aggressive because they just have this look on their face, almost like they want to get away from you because that energy isn't inviting.
Well, and the interesting thing is men are more in tuned with this difference than we women are naturally, and also because of socialization, right? Because it is literally baked into their DNA. Because what are they doing? If we get to the base level, they're looking for a woman to procreate with, right? So they are attuned in their DNA to see these feminine features, right? Who's going to be a good mother? Who's going to be a nurturer? Who's going to be a provider? And so men cannot articulate it, but they see it easier than we do. And some of them can articulate it very well, right? But they'll see it. And I see it, Shelley, I'm sure you see it when you're coaching. So I love that we do everything via Zoom if we're not in person these days, because you can actually see the person. And
Yes.
I see it with my clients when they're like relaxed and they get into themselves, and it's almost like their face softens and they're glowing, and you can physically see when someone's in
Yes.
their feminine or masculine once you understand, right? And by the way, ladies listening, this is not a one sided story. I will share that my brother is very masculine. Like, I mean, he is taking risk all the time, drives very fast cars. I mean, very stereotypically masculine. But he has so in touch with his feminine side, which has made him extremely successful in business because his clients love him, the team loves him. Like, he is very good at switching back and forth. In fact, I watch him sometimes to learn, and I'm like, and it just comes natural to him. And it's interesting the story you shared, because I always think back to at the beginning of my career as a lawyer. I'm working for the most prestigious firm in Atlanta on the most prestigious team, and Fortune 500 companies are our clients. And I remember we had to wear skirt suits, we had to wear heels, we had to wear pantyhose, right? And it was a big deal when we got to wear slingbacks instead of full heels. So we've had this conversation before. But I remember I walked into the conference room, and I mean, I'm in like, a very nice suit, dressed like a lawyer. And I walk in and I'm, having, oh my gosh, my brain is not working today. Anyway, oh, it was a deposition. So, it's where you come in and you're interviewing a client, but both sides are present. So the attorney for the other side, I walked in and it was our first time meeting. And yeah, I was the junior associate. I was 25 or 26. So I walk in my lawyer suit, and he's like, "Honey, could you get me a cup of coffee?" And I was like, "Sure." And so I go get his coffee. I make it for him. I serve it. I'm I'm from the deep south. You're hospitable. This is what you're supposed to do. And then when I sat down across from him, Shelley, and he said, "Oh, when's the other attorney coming?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm the other attorney." I swear his jaw hit the table, right? So, I mean, I could have gotten offended and got my feathers in a huff and gone into my masculine, but I actually entered into the deposition, with the upper hand because he's sitting there like, holy crap, what did I just do? Right. At the same time, my cousin was in construction and she was like, "Oh my gosh, I have to fight with the men all day. They treat me like their secretary when I'm the project manager." I was like, "You know what you do? You just like go along with it. Like you show them what you have and then they're shocked." And I'm not saying this is the right way to handle it, but it's just interesting how we handled it differently. And when I look back, it was just me embracing my feminine energy and using it to my advantage. And I didn't even know what I was doing.
Yeah, I've had plenty of situations where they were like, "Oh," and you just, you smile. And I'm not, notice I didn't say smile through it because in my
Yeah.
mind, same thing, right? I'm like, yes, I have the upper hand here, right? And it is easier when you walk into the room in your feminine because you can, some of those things they just like roll off, right? You're not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily phased by it because when you're in your feminine, I call it my goddess, right? When I'm in my goddess,
Yeah.
you can't bother me because I'm so
Yes.
in tune with self. I'm so there's this confidence that you feel, that you exude, and it's just like, whatever, you know.
Yeah.
Sucks for
Well,
you.
I think of this a lot when I think about, self love, which is uh, hugely important. And it amazes me because, everyone believes in different things, as you and I have talked about often. I believe in God, and I really believe as human beings, we are God's most amazing creature. So, like, how could you not love yourself for how phenomenal you are? And when we take that a notch deeper, women give birth to other human beings. So I feel like that makes us uniquely the most amazing creature that
Right.
God has created. So how can you not love and appreciate yourself? And so in that, there's an underlying acknowledgement of this. And this is why I feel society and sometimes men are intimidated by the feminine energy, right? Because there is so much power
Oh
in the
my
feminine
gosh.
energy.
Yes.
But we
Yes.
have been like, they've screwed with our mind to believe like, oh no, the power's in the masculine energy. So to me it's kind of crazy because I'm like, oh my gosh, we are so powerful as women. I mean, we're so, but it's the subtle lower frequency, high vibration but lower
Low freak.
frequency, not
Yes.
in your face power. And I think so. Is that kind of what you feel you're tapping into when you say when you're in your goddess mode?
Oh yes. Yes. It's almost indescribable, the energy that I feel within my body, like really coming up from like the root chakra all the way up, right? There's a
Uh,
different vibration that you feel when you're really tapped into her, right? It's just a different space versus when I'm in my masculine, because coming from corporate or even, owning a business,
mhm.
sometimes you have to be in your masculine. And
Oh
you're
yeah,
right, when I come out of masculine and I have to recognize that I have to come out first. Let me say that. It's like this, whew, it's almost jolting. And so having to find ways to make that shift more subtle. I actually
yeah,
had a conversation with a male last week or 2 weeks ago. And I've said, like, I've tried really hard to stay in my feminine over the last few years, that when I'm in my masculine, that takes me to a different place. And then I'm like, well, wait a minute, that didn't quite feel right, you know?
So here's what's interesting. When I started Vixen Gathering, my goal was to be in my feminine all the time. And I quickly learned that if I'm in my feminine all the time, I'm not always getting stuff done that needs to get done. And then I talked to my spiritual teacher, and he's like, April, you need to be balanced, masculine and feminine, right? Like, and be able to swing. So it's interesting. So I kind of discovered, at least for me, and again, all of us are, I feel like men are born, I've read a lot of Alison Armstrong, you have too, and her theory is, men are more set. Let's say they're born 70% masculine, 30% feminine. They're a little bit more hardwired, whereas we women can like slide that scale. We're more adaptable. So that's curious and interesting. But, I do think we have to be in our masculine energy sometimes. I just think you pick and choose. And I think, unfortunately, too many women are taking that masculine energy home where they're supposed to be a mother and a lover. And interesting that the term lover comes up because I think we get so busy, especially our core audience, or age like 35 to 55, and you have so many responsibilities that we often forget the lover part, right? And that's so critically important. If you have someone you've chosen to spend your life together with, it's not just that you're partners, but you enjoy each other as well. Like you have
Yeah.
fun together. I mean, you've heard me say this before, when we were around like friends, and one of my friends one time was like, oh gosh, my husband said this, and I said this back. And I was like, what are you doing? He's flirting with you. Just flirt back. It's almost like we get so busy, we don't even recognize. And, for a man to be flirting with us is a great compliment, right? In a respectful,
Right.
appropriate manner. Like there's a difference between flirting and harassment. Um, and so I don't know, it makes me sad when I hear women say that, because you could be, that's a show of affection or love when someone's flirting with you. And we're so busy and we're so in our masculine that we can't even receive this like affection or love.
Yeah, and I think really it depends on our journey as a woman, right? So when I say
Mm-hmm.
I've tried hard to stay in my feminine, that's because coming and working all day and then coming home to children because I'm a single mom, right?
Yep.
There, there was a point where I felt as though I always needed to be in my masculine, right?
Yeah.
And
You had
so
to.
exactly. And now I am still single, but understanding like when I come home, even though there's no partner there, I do need to turn into my feminine. I do,
Mm-hmm.
not just for my children, but for my sake, and
Yeah.
so that's where that comment came from. So I think it's based on like your journey, but understanding even if you are a single mom like me or a single woman like you
Mm-hmm.
still have to come back into your feminine.
Yeah, it's like a gift to yourself. And a lot of times we're forced to. I was talking about the feminine essence course, and the women in that group, it was so weird. Isn't it weird how people are just brought together with like similar backgrounds, right? They both realized they still had an open wound because their big aha was, I've been the man of the household since I was a child, because, one had a father that was just a narcissist. The other one's father left when she was young, and they had to step into this role. And, here, one of them was in their 30s, one in their 40s, and they had never stepped out of that role. And I mean, I just remember the emotion when they had that aha, and they were like, I don't want to be the man of the household anymore. I
Hmm.
want to change this. Again, you might be in a situation like Shelley where you're a single mom and you have to be the man and the woman of the household, right? So there is no perfect scenario, but again, finding what's right for you at this point in your life. So again, these two women had to be in their masculine until that point, and then they realized, oh my gosh, I don't have to do that anymore. Like I can change and I can like gift myself this feminine essence. So I agree with you. This is definitely not one size fits all. And also, I tend to have a little bit more masculine energy, which is funny because I'm kind of so good at the feminine energy and I like the feminine stuff. But I do have a lot of masculine energy, and that is part of my power. And so it's learning how to ride the wave between the two. So you touched on something really important. Unfortunately, we are on a tight schedule today, so we might have to have part two of this. In fact, I'd love to invite some other women to join us for this conversation, because I really think the more voices you hear, that's why I love our panel conversations. You might relate to one person better than another. You hear yourself in someone's story. So, everything we do here at the Vixen Voice is really to let you know, as a listener, number one, you're not alone. We're all in it together. And number two, hopefully you find some inspiration just to live a better life or to show up more in love. So, Shelley, quickly, if you wouldn't mind, how do you transition? Because I have certain ways that, when I know I've been in my masculine and I need to get into or I want to get into my feminine, I have certain modalities for doing that. Do you have the same?
I do. I'll take a walk because being in nature
Hmm.
really helps to bring the feminine essence back into me. Or if I'm coming in from work and the kids are like, "What's for dinner?" and then it's easy to flow right into masculine.
Yeah.
I will start singing or dancing. And one of the things that I do now, even more since you and I had this conversation, is I'll put a little music on. And as you said, shake my booty. I'll just put some music on and just kind of dancing around and shaking my butt or whatever just really helps for me to, one, not take myself so seriously, right? And that is
Yeah.
one of, for me, it's a masculine trait when I'm so serious about myself and not being the cornball that I naturally am. That actually really helps me to shift.
Yeah, I love that. No, for me, napping is huge. Napping totally shifts my energy. Also, taking walks. I just talked about this on another episode, but there's a certain point in the walk where I literally feel my hips like open up and my body settles down. Like I can feel my body almost shifting into a new posture. And then I know I've kind of like cracked that walnut, let's say, gotten the masculine energy out. And same thing. I stole that tip from, it was Tony Robbins' Unleash Your Potential or whatever, the one where you're 24/7. And yes, I walked on the fiery coals, but it was not Tony, but another speaker. And he was like, "Okay, everybody, stand up. All right, shake your booty." And he was like, "I guarantee you can't shake your booty and not smile." And it's absolutely true. Try it, right? So anytime you need that quick refresh, that's a nice little tip. And there's, energetic things. I had another client who found herself working at home in the pandemic. Her family was right on the other side. She had a very intense, decision heavy position. She was an executive. And she was like, "How do I transition before I walk through this door?" Right? Like, I'm literally stuck in this room. And I looked and I was like, "What are those doors?" And she had a balcony off her office. And I'm looking because I have one. And I was like, "Hey, could you go out there for 15 minutes and like have a tea, light a candle, breathe something?" And so, we literally created a routine for her, even though she was in the house with the family, so she could make that shift consciously. And here's why. Look, if you're happy being in your masculine and what happens, awesome. But what my client was experiencing was tremendous mom guilt because she felt like she was going into the home and bringing work energy and bringing work problems, right? And so she wanted to be present for her family. So this may be ringing true to you. When you go home, do you immediately get aggravated by your significant other? If so, you
Yeah.
probably either need to shift or you're having decision fatigue, which is a whole nother topic we can talk about, right? But all of us have these places in our lives that we want to show up differently. And I feel like often that's us being in the wrong energy, masculine or feminine. Like, I'll never forget my ex-boyfriend, first time he was visiting and I was at work and I shot a quick text. You're busy doing stuff. And then I was like, "Hey, want to walk when I get off work?" or something, just very D. Like, I was very much in my D and being direct. And then I texted, I was like, hey, could you disregard that text? Because this is before we could delete them. And then I was like, because I stood up, shook my booty, put a smile on my face. And I was like, hey, I'd so love it if you joined me for a walk. That, I mean, I put it very nice. And like, he was laughing so hard. So I learned, okay, when I'm texting my significant other, let's put a smile on my face. Let's get softer. Let's get out of that mode. And it really just goes a long way. And, for me, also dating makes me feel very feminine. I love to get ready to go out and I take that time to take a bath. I light a candle. Like, I try to make sure I have time before my date for self-care. And we've talked about this. I'm old school, so I feel feminine. I like for a man to take me out and show me the town and do whatever. So I love that. So anyway, we hope that you've enjoyed our conversation today. I'm sorry that I have to cut it off, but we are both on tight schedules today and we felt called to talk about this topic right now. So I hope out there at least one of you are listening and it really impacts your life. And if you'd like more information, please reach out to us. Also, you can leave us reviews, comments on YouTube. You can follow us at Vixen Gathering on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. We would love to hear from you. What is one way that you have started getting into your feminine energy, and how has it impacted your life and the people you love? So don't be a stranger. Shelle, thank you so much for joining me for another
Thank you for
conversation
having
with
me.
Shelle.
And look, and we even resisted being cornballs again. We're doing so good.
Oh, okay. We'll have one episode just on being cornballs. I don't know if everyone can handle it, though. That might be
I
a
don't think they
scary
can.
proposition. Both of us might be a lot, but we'll see. So, everyone listening, as always, my message is the world needs more love. I think we can all agree upon that. And the best way you can show up in love for others is to love yourself. So, if you're listening this, just say, how can I love myself today? How can I feed that feminine energy? And hey, if you're a guy listening, because YouTube's telling me 60% of our listeners are male, think, how can I feed my masculine energy today? How can I show up in love, right? As the provider for the people I love. So thank you for joining us today. We will come back with a panel of amazing women. I already know the two women we're going to invite. And, Shelle knows one of them. She's a great friend of hers, and we're gonna have, excuse me, and Shelle, we're going to have an amazing conversation about masculine and feminine energy. Again, send us your questions. Let us know what you'd like to hear about. Hope that you have a phenomenal day. Show up in love for yourself and others, and we'll talk to you soon.